everyone! This is the third part of a series all about fat and cholesterol. This video is all about the different types of fat that there are, as well as the foods that you should be going for in order to meet your fat requirements. So I just want to note that every single food that has fat in it has unsaturated and saturated fat in it. You cannot completely cut out saturated fat from your diet without also completely cutting out fat from your diet, which, as mentioned in the last video, would be a very bad idea since fat is so important. So if we think about ourselves as animals and all the food that we eat is part of nature, and if we think about the fact that carbs are non-essential but fat and protein are absolutely essential, you kind of wonder, why would nature put saturated fat in every single food that is essential for us to live if it was so bad for us? That's just something to consider. So dairy and coconut oil are the only two foods that I know of that have more saturated fat than unsaturated fat. So that means that all red meat, pork, lard, and eggs, they all have more unsaturated fat than saturated fat. And I just want to note, because this was a big part of my workshop, we have an overwhelming body of evidence that shows that saturated fat does not cause heart disease, and having a diet that's high in fat can actually decrease your LDL, increase your HDL, improve your blood triglycerides, and it actually can decrease your risk of a stroke. So I'm going to discuss two different types of saturated fat. The first is long-chain fatty acids. So this type of saturated fat forms the core structural fats of 75 to 80% of the fatty acids in most of our cells. This type of fat is very important for the structure of our body. It's really interesting because saturated fat actually has no known toxicity. When the body metabolizes fat, the two byproducts are carbon dioxide and water. So again, you have to think, why would nature put saturated fat in all of our essential foods and also make it non-toxic even at high doses if it was so bad for us? The second type of saturated fat that I'll discuss are medium chain triglycerides, also known as MCTs, and you may have heard people talk about MCT oil before. It's quite popular for people to put in their coffee. It's another type of saturated fat, and it's also non-toxic at high doses. And it's interesting because MCTs are absorbed really quickly because they don't require bile acids or bile salts to be broken down. So that means that when you put, for example, MCT oil in your coffee in the morning, or you add it to a smoothie, or maybe you cook your eggs in coconut oil, this fat in your breakfast is going to be absorbed really quickly and utilized really quickly. So it's a great place to start if you are somebody who is fat phobic, who's a little bit concerned about adding more fat to their diet. Starting with MCTs is a great place because you can have peace of mind that they're being absorbed and utilized really quickly. And then we have monounsaturated fatty acids. These also form the core structural fats in our cells, and it's important that we have a balance of saturated and unsaturated fat for the integrity of our cell membrane, because saturated fat tends to make the cell more rigid, whereas unsaturated fat makes the cell really fluid. So it's really important that we have a balance of the two and that we have adequate structure to our cells. This type of fat is also non-toxic at high doses. So as I mentioned, eating these three types of fat has actually been shown to lower your LDL, increase your HDL, and improve your blood triglycerides, as well as lower your chance of having a stroke. I must note though that some people are genetically hyper responders to saturated fat and cholesterol. When they eat these types of foods, they do get an increase in their blood cholesterol. However, typically LDL and HDL increase, and that's something I'm going to be discussing later in another video, but the ratio of HDL to LDL is really important. So if cholesterol is something you want to know more about, you can watch, I think it'll be 2 videos from now. And then we have polyunsaturated fatty acids, and these are omega-3, 6, and 9. However, 9 isn't essential, so I'm just going to discuss 6 and 3. So omega-6 is found in nuts and seeds, legumes, and then vegetables like corn and soy and their oils. Omega-6 tends to be pro-inflammatory, and so it's really important that we don't overeat this type of fat. Then we have omega-3, which is found in fatty fish, almonds and flax, and omega-3 tends to be anti-inflammatory, which is why we really need to balance our omega-3 and our omega-6 properly. Typically in the standard American diet, we are getting 10 times too much omega-6 and we are not getting enough omega-3. So generally in our culture, it's more difficult to get omega-3 because of the foods that we eat culturally. If you were to go to someplace like Japan, they would have a much higher intake of omega-3 just naturally based off of the foods that they're eating there. And eating too much omega-6 increases your inflammation within the body. And inflammation is the driving force behind a lot of chronic diseases such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and metabolic syndrome. If you are at risk for one of those, it's definitely worth it to try to reduce your omega-6 intake. Omega-6 is mostly eaten in the form of vegetable or seed oils, and these types of oils are found a lot in restaurant food as well as fried foods, and then also your packaged snack foods. So things like chips and crackers, cookies, other baked goods, as well as I mentioned, fast food. So you want to limit these types of foods. Omega-3 is mostly found in fatty fish. It can also be found in plant sources. However, the plant sources have the form of omega-3 called ALA. The kind that is essential to us is DHA or EPA. And if you go to buy a supplement, you're looking for DHA and EPA. Plant sources though, as I mentioned, they have ALA. Our body doesn't very efficiently convert ALA to DHA and EPA. So if you are a vegan or a vegetarian or you don't eat fish, then it's definitely important that you supplement with omega-3 because plant sources are not going to be enough for you. And finally, we have trans fats. So I think most people know that trans fats are bad for you. They were banned in September of 2018. Even Health Canada agrees that they're bad for us. So we don't really have to worry about it. So trans fats have been linked to heart disease, increased inflammation, metabolic syndrome, obesity, these types of things. So that's why they were banned. So the amount of fat that you should be eating greatly varies between individuals. So if you are looking to really dial in your macronutrients, then you can certainly email me or contact me and we can help to figure out your calorie range as well as your macronutrient range. It really varies based on somebody's activity level, whether they have adrenal or chronic fatigue, whether they have hypothyroidism, genetically high cholesterol, they have neurological issues, mood or energy disturbances, whether you're pregnant or breastfeeding, whether you want to lose weight or gain weight, or whether you want to maintain your weight. But just for the general public, I suggest eating anywhere between 30% to about 60%, just for the average person. So if you are looking to lose weight, you may want to increase your fat a little bit and decrease your carbs. And if you have a really active job or you're an athlete, that's a situation where you may want to be eating a little bit more carbs and a little bit less fat to account for the extra carbs. So which foods should you be eating with fat? And this is something that is very, very confusing to people. I feel like a lot of people are kind of getting on board with this idea that we maybe got it wrong in the past and that we shouldn't fear fat so much and we should be increasing it in our diet. But that's where the confusion is. What foods should we be eating then? So my nutrition philosophy is you really can't go wrong with eating whole foods or natural foods. So that's foods like full fat dairy, meat, seafood, nuts and seeds, eggs, fruits and vegetables, legumes, as well as high fat fruits such as coconut, olives, and avocado. And then making sure to use healthy cooking oils such as butter, coconut oil, olive oil, avocado oil, flaxseed oil, walnut oil, and you want to avoid the processed vegetable and seed oils such as palm kernel oil or corn oil or soy oil. I feel like dairy has kind of been demonized. It's certainly not for everybody because it caused digestive issues in people who are lactose intolerant, but dairy is a great source of saturated fat, so definitely don't feel guilty about eating cheese and yogurt. Eat ice cream in moderation. You want to watch your sugar with ice cream. And things like sour cream or cottage cheese are good too. The most important thing though is that you have a balanced diet. So these foods that are high in fat such as meat and dairy, eggs, nuts and seeds, All of these foods are very nutrient dense. They have a lot of vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, and you should balance them out with vegetables and fruit. I feel like there's really an emphasis on fruits and vegetables for their vitamin and mineral content, but you really need a balance of it all. You need the meat and dairy, fish and eggs to balance out your fruits and vegetables as well. They all have different nutrient profiles, and you need to make sure that you are eating a balance of all of it. That being said, I just want to remind you that you shouldn't feel guilt about eating these higher fat foods as long as they're whole foods and they're not processed. The main thing that you want to focus on is reducing your processed and packaged foods. And these are the foods with fat that you should avoid. So avoid packaged foods such as different crackers. There's some crackers that are totally okay, but certain salad dressings, marinades, different sauces, frozen dinners, baked goods like boxed cookies, chips, as well as fried foods, and some foods that are found at restaurants. These are the foods that have refined and processed vegetable or seed oils, and those are mainly the fats that you want to stay away from. Those are linked to cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, and obesity. So that's it for today. The next video is going to be all about how refined carbs and sugar contribute to an increase in inflammation and an increase in your chances of developing cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, metabolic syndrome, and obesity. Generally just chronic diseases. So if you have any questions, you can let me know by emailing me or commenting below, and I will have the next video out soon.